Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be looking back at a really, really fascinating event. A lot of the sort of enduring mysteries around it, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
Mm.
And to help us kind of unpack all this, we're looking at an issue of the Third Decade Journal. It's from November 1989. And this journal was known for its pretty in-depth analysis of the assassination.
Yeah, it's amazing how even all these years later, this event still holds so much intrigue. There are so many people still trying to figure this whole thing out. And the third decade really was a hub for researchers and thinkers, people who wanted to challenge the official narrative. And this issue dives into some really, really compelling alternative theories.
Yeah, and they don't waste any time getting right into it. Like right off the bat, they're kind of throwing a curveball at the lone gunman theory.
Yeah.
Especially when they talk about Lee Harvey Oswald's trip to the Soviet Union. The author is super skeptical about the lack of attention that he got from intelligence agencies. Just doesn't seem to add up, If Oswald was really such a threat, wouldn't you think he'd be under closer watch?
Exactly. And this whole point is really, really highlighted when the article gets into Gordon Blaine's book, Oswald in Russia. The author totally picks apart Blaine's assumptions about why Oswald did what he did and what his motives were while he was in Russia. It's like the author's saying, hey, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's not just accept everything at face value.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, let's not jump to conclusions.
Yeah.
And I thought it was super interesting how the author ties this back to the bigger picture of the assassination. It's like by questioning the accepted narrative of Oswald's time in Russia, it opens up this whole other avenue of thinking about what his role in the assassination might have been.
Totally. And that's when things start to get really, really interesting. That's when the article really starts to go against the grain. Like, for example, they dive deep into the Zapruder film, that famous home movie of the assassination, and they break down the bullet trajectories, like frame by frame, highlighting all these inconsistencies with what the Warren Commission concluded.
Right. And just for those who might not know, the Warren Commission was the official government body that investigated the assassination, and they're the ones who concluded that Oswald acted alone and fired 3 shots. But this article directly contradicts that.
Yeah, they totally do. By going through the Zapruder film with a fine-tooth comb and comparing it to all the eyewitness accounts, the author suggests that there could have been way more shots fired, and maybe even from different locations. So yeah, it raises some serious questions about the official story and how the assassination actually happened.
And then on top of that, they point out some pretty shocking discrepancies in the witness accounts. Specifically, they talk about the location of a Secret Service agent during the shooting. At first glance, it might seem like a minor detail, but it actually has huge implications.
You're so right. If they can't even get these small details straight, it makes you wonder how reliable any of their information is. You know what I mean? And that's actually a theme that pops up a lot in this issue of the third decade. They're constantly questioning the official story, like they just don't buy it.
And the article isn't afraid to go there with some pretty bold claims. Like they even talk about a book about the JFK assassination that was supposedly suppressed because of how controversial it was. It kind of hints at a possible cover-up.
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting detail. It adds a whole other layer to the whole thing. So according to the article, this book basically dives into claims that the CIA was involved in a cover-up and that there was this network of anti-Castro operatives involved. It paints a much more complicated and honestly maybe even a more sinister picture than what we were initially told.
It's like you're peeling back the layers of an onion.
Yeah.
And with every layer, the story gets more complicated and more intriguing. And then you've got this whole Edwin Sinatra thing that they bring up.
Oh, yeah. The mystery man in the photo. That's a wild one. So there's this guy in a photo that's connected to the assassination. And the author thinks that Edwin Sinatra could actually be a fake name, like a pseudonym, which is crazy if you think about it. A fake name in such a high-profile case.
Yeah. Talk about suspicious.
Yeah.
It definitely raises some red flags. The author seemed to be saying that this Edwin Sinatra, whoever he really is, deserves a closer look because he might be holding a missing piece of the puzzle.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that. The author isn't just presenting facts. They're challenging us to think critically, to question what we think we know, and to be open to the possibility that there's a lot more to the story than meets the eye.
Yeah, and when you start thinking about the possibility of information being suppressed, well, that's when things get really, really unsettling. And this issue of the third decade touches on that quite a bit. They even call out the House Select Committee for holding back certain audio recordings from the public.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up to think that there could be crucial evidence out there that's being deliberately hidden. especially in a case this big. It makes you question, like, who's really in control and what are they trying to hide? Right. And this whole lack of transparency just breeds suspicion and distrust. It's almost like certain people wanted to control the narrative, like they wanted to make sure the public only got one side of the story.
It's interesting you say that because the article also talks about the different accounts about the limousine's route, like the route that the car carrying President Kennedy was taking. They suggest that maybe the car deviated from the planned route, which, if true, would totally change our understanding of what went down.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The author points out these discrepancies between what the Secret Service said and other evidence that's out there. Like, if the route was changed, it makes you wonder why. Was it a simple mistake, or was there something more intentional going on?
And then there's that whole thing about the potentially planted witness.
Yeah.
The woman who claims she was at Dealey Plaza when it happened. But the article points out that her story doesn't match up with the photographic evidence. So it's like, was she a real witness with a messed up memory? Or was she put there on purpose to confuse everyone?
It's a really strange detail that adds another layer of mystery to the whole thing. Was she a genuine witness who just got things mixed up? Or was she part of some elaborate scheme to manipulate the narrative? It's a question that, unfortunately, the article doesn't really have a clear answer to.
Yeah, and then you've got David Ferry, who was a pilot with ties to anti-Castro groups. He was actually investigated by Jim Garrison, who was the New Orleans district attorney. He seems like a character straight out of a spy novel. All cloak and dagger.
Ferry is a fascinating guy. There's no doubt about that. His suspicious activities and then his sudden death right before he was supposed to testify in Garrison's investigation. Well, it just adds fuel to the fire, It makes people think that maybe he knew too much and got silenced.
It all kind of points to the possibility that the assassination wasn't just a random act by a lone wolf, but that it was actually like a really complex and well-planned plot with multiple players involved, like a conspiracy.
Yeah, and the article doesn't shy away from exploring some of the more out there theories about the assassination. Like, they even talk about the 3 tramps that were found near the assassination site. Their identities were never confirmed, which has led to all sorts of conspiracy theories.
Some people think those tramps were involved in the assassination, while others think they were just a distraction. A way to divert attention from what was really going on, whatever their role was. The fact that they were there and no one knows who they are, well, it just adds another piece to the puzzle.
It's amazing how these seemingly small details can become so significant in a case like this. It really shows how much this event still resonates with people and how much we still want to understand what truly happened.
Speaking of details, the article also mentioned something pretty interesting about a photograph of Jack Ruby, the guy who killed Oswald. So in this photo, Ruby is visiting Parkland Hospital shortly after the assassination, and the author points out that he seems to be hiding something under his coat.
Oh, wow, that's weird. What could he have been hiding? And what does it mean? It's those little things that keep the mystery alive, They make you question everything and encourage people to keep digging.
It's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing and some might not even belong in the first place.
Exactly. And this issue of the third decade is like shining a spotlight on those missing pieces. It makes us question whether we're getting the whole story. Whether there's more to it than we've been told.
And then the article switches gears a bit and starts talking about Penn Jones Jr., who was a researcher known for his really thorough analysis of the evidence. He actually went so far as to accuse the government of tampering with evidence to make the lone gunman theory stick.
Jones was a big name in the JFK assassination research community, and his accusations were controversial, but they raised some important questions about whether the official investigation was really as impartial as they claimed to be.
And then there's the whole issue of witness intimidation, which the article touches on too. It seems like some witnesses might have been pressured to change their stories or just stay quiet altogether out of fear.
That's a really scary thought. The article mentions several instances where witnesses claimed they were threatened or harassed after they shared information that didn't fit with the official narrative. If that's true, then that's a huge injustice.
It's chilling to think that key witnesses might have been silenced. And then the article gets into allegations that Oswald was in contact with the FBI before the assassination. But apparently this information was never shared with the Warren Commission, which is pretty alarming.
That's a massive bombshell. It makes you wonder why they would hide that information. Was it a deliberate cover-up or just a major oversight in the investigation? It's hard to say.
It seems like every time we turn a corner, we find more questions and more hints that something is being hidden.
That's the thing about this case. It's a tangled web of events and conflicting accounts and possible cover-ups, and it all needs to be looked at more closely.
Yeah, and the article brings up yet another discrepancy. This time it's about the timing of a phone call that Oswald supposedly made to a known FBI informant. The official records about when the call happened and how long it lasted don't seem to add up, which suggests that maybe someone messed with the records.
It's another example of how even a small inconsistency can cast doubt on the whole story. It makes you wonder how many other details might have been overlooked or deliberately misrepresented.
Man, it's just crazy to think about how much information there is about this event and how many different stories are out there. It's really complicated, and it shows just how dedicated some people are to uncovering the truth.
You're absolutely right. And the third decade was so important in giving those people a voice, a platform to share their research and challenge the official narrative.
Right.
This particular issue we're looking at is a perfect example of that.
And yeah, they definitely don't hold back when it comes to criticizing the House Select Committee, like the way they handled the investigation and especially their decision to keep those audio recordings hidden from the public. It almost feels like they were trying to control the narrative and keep people in the dark.
That lack of transparency is a big problem. It just makes people more suspicious and less likely to trust anything they say. By hiding evidence, they basically just fueled the conspiracy theories and made people question their motives.
It feels like this whole deep dive has been like a constant battle between the official story and all these unanswered questions and inconsistencies that just don't add up.
I think that's what makes the JFK assassination so captivating. It's a story that defies easy answers and forces us to acknowledge that we might never know the whole truth. Maybe that's why people are still so fascinated by it. It's like this giant puzzle that we're all trying to solve.
So after taking a deep dive into this issue of the third decade, what's the main takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about after hearing all of this?
I think the most important thing is to remember to think critically and never stop questioning. Don't just accept the official narrative at face value. Dig deeper, look at the evidence, consider different perspectives, and keep asking questions. The JFK assassination is a case that deserves to be studied and analyzed, and who knows what else we might find out in the years to come.
It's a good reminder that history isn't always black and white. Sometimes new information comes to light, or we interpret things differently, and it changes our whole understanding of the past.
This issue of the third decade has given us a glimpse into just how complex and mysterious the JFK assassination really is. If you're intrigued by what we've talked about today, I encourage you to check out the Third Decade archives and all the research that's available. You might just stumble upon something that nobody else has noticed before.
That's what's so cool about exploration and discovery. Sometimes the most interesting things are the questions that we're left with, the mysteries that keep us searching for answers. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring.